I figured we've heard enough on the history of it pretty much, but I'll go through a few slides to introduce the subject, and then we've got Bill Dinger from Rainsweet, kind of with the processor end of it. George Kaufman's with Riverbend Organic Farms. They don't do well, you got some tests, but primarily blueberries, but they do it all organically, and I thought he could bring a good perspective on what they do for SWD. And Paul Borgen with Pratum Co-op from the supplier end. So let me pull up a few slides here. Got it. Well, while we're waiting, maybe I'll just go down the list here and ask you guys how you saw last year on SWD. How was 2015? Paul, you want to start? Sure.
Is this on? Can you hear me without it?
We haven't been using it much, so.
I actually thought last year might have been a little less pressure than we've seen in other years. And I think maybe there's a number of reasons for that. It wasn't an exceptionally cold winter last year, but we did have a frost event or two that might have kept the population somewhat in check. And also the temperatures that we had during the summer. We know that you get over 85 and the Drosophila are not real fond of that heat, and so we get some suppression due to that as well. And so with the long, dry, hot summer, I think maybe we saw a little bit of suppression there. So I think it might have kept our activity down a little bit. Have some concerns, with the season coming upon us. We've had a pretty mild winter, and I think the forecast for this summer are for more typical, average type conditions. So. If you're going to look at that and try and forecast a potential problem, I do think that we may have more potential this year than last.
I'd probably echo what Paul said. I know heading into the season last year, we had some pretty major concerns. Would we be able to control it organically? We had pretty high numbers early in the season, and but the hot weather seemed to save us and really kept the population in check, and we had a pretty good year controlling the spot of things.
I pretty much say the same thing. I was expecting last year to be really an issue, but as it turned out, whether it was the heat or because everybody was spraying, because everybody was so scared, we really didn't have an issue last year. I am concerned about this year because there was no cold weather this winter. I mean, unless they drown. They're out there, and we're early again. I mean, if you look at the degree days, I mean, this is early as last year, not a little bit earlier. So I'm really concerned again that it could be an issue.
I feel we're responsible because I feel like we were, from our end in the newsletter and stuff, we were doing quite a bit of the sky is full early in the season. And I think the heat really did suppress it. But and we got this up now, so I'll go through a few of these, and I think it would reinforce that. But just a little history. You guys can see a thing. We should go to this mirror or something. This is when this thing first got on our radar. It's only been 6 years. So this was the first notice that we got. It was that something was going on. Is that going to work, Jason? Or work or something? And then we started getting more information out of California. And actually, 2009, I've talked to a few of the processors. our fruit was getting infected that year. It was going through, nobody really knew, but it was showing up, and it showed up in the product that year that wasn't treated on a number of occasions. So it took us a while to get up to speed. But that was 2009, and this is just a brief overview from my point of view on what we've learned. This is their pattern every year. We know this. It might start out at a different spot or whatever, but it's always going to be that once they build up, late season is always going to be the highest pressure. It's going to vary between the different regions. Up in BC, east side, down here. We're going to have California. This thing really varies according to region. 3 main weather factors: severity of the winter, the temperatures during the growing season, and then rain or humidity during the growing season also. And then you got the individual fields. So it's going to vary quite a bit by crop type, surrounding habitat, cultural practices. I know you guys know most of this, but it's just kind of put it into some context. And this one, we should all know. And this is where our learning curve has really come up over the last 5 years. We really know pretty well how this insect works. And it works the same all over. It just reacts differently from year to year. We're getting much better at forecasting when we're going to have problems, when we're not. They're getting better every year. So keep on top of the forecast. And this is where it comes down to the individual fields. I know we're over-treating out there. Part of the reason is these guys say we didn't have a problem. Well, we have a problem, but I think we've all gotten into pretty much the routine of spraying. And that's good. We got control, but now maybe the crisis has passed, but I really feel like we got to manage it now and start backing off and figuring out the ways we can work around this when we're not on a spray program every 7 days. Sampling, once there's ripe fruit in those fields, we still keep taking trap counts and everything else, but they're pretty inaccurate. They really don't apply once you've got the ripe fruit in the field. This whole thing for sampling, putting fruit, this is the backbone of our sampling program. And it isn't as time consuming as you think if you get set up for it. I think that's the same thing, pretty much. Especially if you're uncertain about the risk factors. And this is where knowing your own field, your own threat levels, your own risk factors, you can back off from this essential of where we've gotten to. If you don't know, we're going to tell you to spray every 7 to 10 days. And really, you're the only one who can figure out if you don't have to. And this is kind of where I'm going, kind of with what our program is figuring out the individual field recommendations much more. And that's just where we went these last 5 years where we had really good data. This is all grant-funded stuff. 2015 on, we don't have any more public funding for a scouting program, but it really varies from year to year. And we're just getting some traps out now, and I know the population's out there. We're picking them out. But I'd like to have like 5 or 10 traps out there all winter long, same locations, same places, not even necessarily in the fields. In fact, it shouldn't be in the field. So we can track this population and give you a better idea of what we're seeing every year. And when we do get heat spikes, our trap counts go way up because it drives all these bugs into the adult stage. But they actually suppresses their overpositioning so that the trapping, really, it takes some real interpretation and understanding what the trap data means. It's not, this is what happens with our heat. We get real big spikes in our counts, but we actually see a suppression of actual fruit infestation. So it gets complicated. I think that's the last one. 2015, this is why we were crying wolf so much at the beginning of the year. This is coming out of the winter and where our trap counts were. We had a huge population out there after that really mild winter. But we got so hot that it really did crash it, and it brought it back under control. If we would have stayed mild last year, it was kind of like a perfect storm situation. We could have seen, or I would have expected to see a whole lot more problems. And we still got that possibility this year. We didn't get a good kill over the winter. And if we stay mild, it would be great for the crop. It's also going to be great for this bug. So that's one thing, certainly. And I think I'll just leave this up. It's the risk factors. I did this handout a while ago, but understanding leaves, it's kind of the basic principles to me to dealing with this. Is certainly caneberries are a lot more susceptible than any of our other crops, especially late season. And you can see that with our plantings. I mean, our late season crop is kind of going away because of SWD pressure. Can you say that, Bill?
Yeah, once you get to evergreens, it's almost impossible to keep them all out. I mean, I think you could spray every 3 days and you wouldn't keep them out completely. I think last year, we were able to control it, but we definitely did not keep them all out. We were always picking up 1, 2 every time we did a sample. I think it's just, yeah.
It is demoralizing for the growers.
Yeah.
George, you want to say a little bit about the organic program? Because I'm sure there's a lot of skeptics that are like,
Yeah. Well, we don't have a lot of organic spray options that work, so I'll get to those in a moment, but we do focus a lot on overall methods, and I see that Thomas put some things up there. A main one, or a big one we think is drip irrigation. That really helps us keep the humidity down in the canopy, keep the less survival for the adults and also less active, less conducive for their launch. We do use weed mat also. That I think that helps kind of keep the humidity down too. The drip irrigation's underneath it, keep the water down there. We harvest. We try to harvest often, so the fruit doesn't have a chance to hang out. Hanging out there and be susceptible to the adults. And I guess the spray program, we use an electrostatic sprayer, produces charged particles. I feel like it gets pretty good coverage on the plant, and that's important for organics because it's a lot of it's contact. It's a contact kill. Entrust is our main product we use. It's a Spinosa bacterium. We have to spray every 5 days if we burn. It lasts about 5 days, and we're limited to about 5, 6 sprays a year. We are concerned about it though. It's about the main product that works organically, and if they develop resistance to it, it's quite a new software. Develop resistance, we probably would be in pretty big trouble. We do use a couple other products, Rendivos and Venerate, and they work for us. They're ingested by the insect, and we rotate those in just to hope that we can maybe slow down and reduce the chance of resistance being built up for intrust. And these other cultural methods, a lot of just common sense stuff. We don't clean out our pickers out in the field, our machine harvesters, we don't have piles of coals on the ground that can be an inoculum source.
A lot of the take care, you got a lot of complaints around, you guys have been working on that.
That and the cherry trees too, wild cherries, removing those from the borders, I think that helps quite a bit. And we do monitor, we have apple cider and wine traps out there. Gives us an idea, I guess, going into the season, what kind of pressure gather and feel. And then throughout the season, we sample the berries for larvae. We have our guys at the weigh station, they take a handful. Every pallet that comes in, we throw it in a Ziploc bag, and then at the end of the day, to do a saltwater test on it, just to see if we're getting any larvae. We've had a really good year last year, last couple of years actually. So the program's worked so far. Remains to be seen, I guess, what happens this year, and then the future what happens with interest.
I know well, we go your older border, I guess, if you look with you too, so we kind of identified it, like those older bushes you've got, this is blueberries, but the big older bushes that are being harvested, those Berkways and some of those are some really hot spots. We're gonna pick them up,
And the variety of legacy that we've been hanging out with forever, have a long harvest season.
Yeah.
That's a big concern. Control for the season.
Paul, you want to say a little bit from your perspective on what control methods and what you've been seeing?
Yeah, I think if there's any one take-home message that I think we as an industry need to adhere to is our overuse of the pyrethroid class of insecticides. I know from a price point, they're very appealing, and but we have at least four classes of chemistry that are available to us. And I think that if we're looking for long-term viability for a control option, it's just very, very important that we rotate industries and do the best that we can to save the tools that we have. One of the concerns that I've always had with the pyrethroids, besides resistance, is the fact that they're indiscriminate materials that take out a lot of beneficial insects. And so I'm concerned that we may, over time, with continued use, we may over time see some other insect problems such as spider mites moving into our fields that typically and historically not been a problem. I have seen spider mites on blackberries before. Usually it's a late season variety like a Chester. It's unusual, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So I'm just thinking that, repeated uses of pyrethroids, we could possibly see some issues there. So I think that rotating is extremely important, and so I would urge us as an industry to make sure that we're doing that.
I think the standard thing is Malathion Brigade, right, or Mustang.
Mustang was.
Yeah. Well, are there any questions?
Yeah.
Keep going with people.
You guys heard of oxidate giving any help with Drosophila?
We've used Oxidate, last year we used JED, which is similar. It is something that it's in our program. How much it works, we're not sure. Sometimes we got to try different things and hope we can try to slow down resistance, but it is something that we got to try again.
What do you feel about it? Do you think it works?
I just heard from the greenhouse grower that it works on, he thinks it helps.
I mean, what I know quite a few guys have used it in their program. I'm a little skeptical, but it's not going to do any harm,
Right.
so. Is there another question back? Yeah, Brian.
What have you learned about the overwintering populations? Where are they hanging out at? And along with that, what have you learned about how far these Drosophila can move in a given season? Are they fairly localized or so forth. And then I have one other follow-up question after I hear that.
Well, as far as overwintering, you know, that they hang out in the, basically anywhere they can. If you got a heat source or someplace like that, they'll have a higher survival rate. I think the consensus is that they hang out in the evergreens. You know, a lot of baby trees where it goes, this bug likes to head up, actually, into trees and hides out in crevices and other places. But to tell you the truth, they haven't really found a whole lot in their searches in the wild to verify that. I'm not sure how much we need to know about that to control them at this point. I mean, they're going to hang out in the wild along your borders. They're going to hang out in the riparian habitats, any place that you can think of that's going to protect them from the wild, from the weather. So that's a little vague, but that's pretty much where the research is right now that I've seen. As far as how far they fly, you know, they're a weak flyer, but there's speculation they can get blown a fair amount of the ways. But really, it's when they come out of winter, they've got to find that first food source. So if you've got a source that they can breed on, that's probably more important than what population's born in. And that's what we kind of watch for, is to see if we can pick up that first overwintering generation, which is a really low population. If we can find those first infestations, then we know, then we've got the biofix. We need to kind of move on to do more forecasting. But there are certain hot spots we've identified, certainly in certain fields, early season raspberry fields or June-bearing strawberries that occasionally will get hit. And so we watch those for the signs of where they'll be.
So they haven't necessarily found them in our fields, our caneberry fields that have green leaf material a good part of the year. That's not where they're hiding.
Most of them seem to move out of the field. Once the crop is not there, they're dispersing in the fall. If the crop's there, they'll come in and it's
Yet they'll go to evergreen. That doesn't make
They,
sense.
well, they've got a, you know, and there's speculation on this, on what they feed on. I think they probably do feed on yeasts and sap and other pollen and other things that they need to survive. But to breed, they need they need a fruit host.
Okay. So I've got a grower friend that has changed his approach to attacking this. I'm curious what you guys think about whether he's been effective, but it was effective last year when maybe the population wasn't really strong. But he's kind of been more aggressive early on, and so you know he'll come in with pre-bloom with a pretty good spray that knocks stuff out, and then after bloom he comes back with another good spray to knock things out, and then right before harvest he'll come in with maybe a pyrethroid or something like that, or delegate maybe, something like that, and then he's done. He's done, and he's not doing it every 7 days or every 10 days, and it's actually not me, I'm not making this up. His theory is that he's taking care of any of the population problem early on, and there's not going to be this group that's going to be continuing to lay eggs and so forth. Do you feel like that's a plausible practice that might really help us instead of having to be spraying our fruit every 7 days?
The trouble with is making a general recommendation of that. If that works on his site, that's great. And I'll comment on this too, but I know what we've been speculating about is there's a real weak point in this flies generation, which is that overwintering generation that comes out, it's weak, it's survived the whole winter, and it has to survive until there's fruit there. And if we could nail that generation, that population at a low point when they're weakest, and even not the population, that curve that we had, back a week or 10 days, we get most of our fruit off if you can retard them coming out. to 10 days. And I think there's merit to that. It's just that the work hasn't been done. So I'm not going to be the one to tell somebody to use that kind of a program. But I think growers need to start experimenting and looking at different programs.
Yeah, and I would agree with Tom. I think it's going to be a site-specific situation. I mean, I think it depends on, you know, what the surrounding cropping production systems are like around you. And, you know, if you're isolated, then you might be able to get by with such a thing. But, you know, if you have a stone fruit like peaches or cherries or those types of things, I think the population is going to be such that it might be more difficult in a situation like that.
That's what I think. If you're isolated, I mean, if your neighbor's growing raspberries next to you, you're out of luck. I mean, you're gonna have to be spraying when the fruit's out there every 7 days. That's what I think.
I would just echo what they said, yeah.
Other questions? Jason?
Well, I guess, you know, I feel like we're stuck in these 7 to 10 day spray cycles. Do you guys see any way that we can get out of it? Like, what is it gonna take to not do that, other than farmers just taking the risk on themselves and losing their crop? Like, because, you know, they have the packers who say 0 tolerance, so they have to maintain no larvae, no fruit. And then they have suppliers who are like, well, we got lots of chemicals for you.
Don't make the processor out to be the bad guy.
No,
This is ours.
it's the consumer going to the processor, the grower, you know, it's all a cyclical thing. Where can we interject something to, because I mean, long term, I mean, I don't see a way that this is going to maintain viable. I mean, once the consumer becomes very aware that, you know, berries are getting sprayed 7 days, you know, it's not going to be anything.
Well, I definitely agree with that, but to me, I don't know what the alternative is. The one thing I would like to see people do is spray behind the picker, rather than like the day before you're gonna pick. Because we test all of our fruit for pesticide residues, and you can see at the beginning of the season, there's virtually nothing. Alpine, Mustang doesn't show up, and it just goes like this. By the time you get to the end of the season, you can Malafine and Mustang are way up here. Now they're well below the tolerance, but I think anything we can do to minimize that spike. If you go back to 2009, before spotted micro was around, you didn't have that at all. You didn't see this spike. Even in 2010, because we didn't know it. We're probably starting in 2011 every year. You see, you can look at the pesticide residue sample and say, hey, this is from the end of the season, or this is from the end of the season. So I do agree that I wish there was something different.
Well, wasn't there a natural predator or something they were looking at releasing that might eventually clean up the environment? I thought there was a wasp that they brought in from South Korea or something.
I'm skeptical.
Are you skeptical?
Yeah, I think the long term, yeah, that's probably going to be a part of the solution. But you're more likely to have control of that with something like the stink bug or something. A fruit fly, you can release sterile males and things like that. There are strategies they're trying, and if anyone here's got any other information on this, please let me know. But it is extremely difficult to control something that multiplies. It's like trying to control rabbits with wolves. You know, it's just, and also with our 0 tolerance to it, it makes it very difficult to get below the economic threshold. But I think it's a multiple approach that you get rid of the habitat around your field. You try different strategies on your particular field. You do rotation. Some years you might not have to spray all that often because the pressure is low. Some years you'll have to spray more. But it's getting flexibility in attacking it from a number of different approaches. But habitat modification and in-field architecture, how you handle your plants, all those things can make a big difference.
I know for a while there was some interest in attract and kill formulations such as the apple industry was using for coddling moth. They had stations set up in the field that attracted and trapped and killed the insect. I know they were looking at that. I don't think there's been a whole lot of success as of yet, but I think that's something they can look at. I think when we first got into this SWD scenario, I think there was a lot of talk about our residuals and how some products would have, up to 14 days of residual, and which would make it a lot more palatable than what we're currently doing. But in the field, it hasn't worked that effectively. We just don't seem to get the residual control out of the products, so it forces us out there every 7 days.
And I think you're right about the attract and kill. And they're getting better. What I've got here is where we're moving toward is dry lures and attractants. And there's a lot of private money and research going into this. We're getting better and better about having better attractants for them. So our trapping is going to be better. But what also is going to be better is attract and kill formulations like GF120. If we've got a better attractant, then we can combine that with an insecticide, and there's these kinds of studies going on where you can apply an attract and kill type material down the base of the plants or around the edge of the fields that will attract it and kill it, keep the residues off the fruit. They hang out in that a lot in the moist, shady areas. And so if we can get the toxics down to them down there, and get them drawn to it, I think that is going to be one of the strategies we're going to see develop over the next 3 or 4 years. Hopefully sooner. I know there's products out there being tested, but that could change our routine pretty dramatically if it worked. Yeah.
Work that I did as a forest entomologist was with pheromones for attracting the mountain pine beetle, the southern pine beetle. We did some work with 2 or 3 other species. The difficulty with traps is it takes so many of them. You can't just put a few out and expect to remove all the Drosophila that you've got coming into your field. It takes a lot of traps. And you could probably do that. Right now, I understand that they do respond to wine or apple juice or any of those, and they will come into those, and you could trap them that way. But it does require a lot of traps. If you've got a problem, like, this is costing a lot of money and you start to throw your fruit away, I think you could probably do it, but it does take a lot of traps to do it.
I don't know if Wei is still here. There's been, and in China, that was always the thing they said they still do, is mass trapping. It isn't attracted to a pheromone, but it is attracted to...
It is attracted, though.
To yeast and yeast type of material. But, and Amy Dreves, who's been giving the talks on this pheromone, is still working on that type of a strategy, but so far, it hasn't been viable on a commercial level, or even shown to me a lot of promise. But on a smaller planting and someplace you want to keep spray free, it's a strategy that they might have to pursue.
No, I was not suggesting that you use a pheromone either, just because I was doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
I work with traps, but this insect does not produce a pheromone such as these other insects do. So that's not a viable method. All I'm saying is it is attracted to the apple juices and the wines, and so that's a possibility. But it does take a lot of traps, and so if you got a decent sized field, you're talking about a lot of money to put them out. But if you've got a serious enough problem, I think you might control it with that.
Yeah, Julie.
Yeah, I was just back east at the national meeting, and they, of course, were talking a great deal about this, and they have real integrated systems they're working on. They are working on the trapezoidal sphere based on the codling moth, and it's they've even determine what color, what shape, what size, and so they're having some pretty good success with that. They're finding that the surrounding habitat is extremely important, and that the flies are migrating in and out, and that's where we're finding them only even here, mostly on the edges of fields, you know, the work you were doing early, and they showed they weren't really penetrating into the middle of fields. It's mainly because, that, probably what we don't know, probably what we're guessing, is they're overwintering out around the edges of the fields. As our fields defoliate, they're looking for somewhere to overwinter. And what they're finding is morning and night, when they're most active, they're migrating in and out of the edges of the fields. And so the trapping, there was an organic guy there's some big growers down there, so he was spraying heavily the perimeters and then ringing with traps. They're trapping the perimeters of their fields. They're finding that they only live, you're right, in the lower sections of your row, and they grow a lot of erect and semi-erect, and they grow in a lot of ENT trellises, so they have an open V shape a lot. So there's not a lot in the interior of their rows, but we have those trailing varieties, we're not going to get away from that. But also that they like to be down underneath and low and on the edges of the fields. And so they're targeting that trapping. It doesn't get you to that zero tolerance, doesn't get you completely to that, but maybe you're right with that early trying to stop that early hatch from establishing itself. And then these other issues, you get a little bit away. But once you start spraying as often as we're spraying with the cost of sprays and with the timing of sprays, the trapping becomes pretty efficient. And they're finding out how often you have to change them, and it's not as often as you think. And if they can get this based on, if you're right, the coddling model, which has been successful, then that could be a real asset to us, because you fill it with your toxin, you hang it, and you replenish your toxin. But they're doing a lot of trapping. They even, when you get the proceedings, it's NARVA, for those of you who aren't familiar, they'll put the proceedings up for that, and there's a lot of information. There's a lot of work being done all over the country on this.
Yeah, actually, the East Coast has got the large grant funding at this point, and they're doing a lot more research out there than we are out here on it, which is a shame, but that's the dynamic right now.
One other thing that's kind of working in our favor too is the advances in sprayer technology that we're seeing, and there's a lot of these heavy sprayers out there now that are getting better coverage, and we may be able to start extending our times a little bit just due to the fact that we're getting better coverage than going by air, and but somebody's going to have the courage to try that. But I do think that we do have some advantages of the sprayer technology.
Well, George, you guys use the electrostatic sprayers, and I think especially with weaker materials like Randivo and Venerate, some of those things, using the better spray technology too enhances their usefulness.
Yeah, some of those, just gets good coverage underneath the leaves, gets down inside the canopy. You actually put spray paper out around the canopy of the plant, and found it gets pretty coverage. So we think that really helps us organically.
Pricey?
A little bit,
yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, you want to say anything?
I shouldn't say what I'm thinking.
What's that?
I'm really skeptical of the trap idea.
Well, I think it's got a place and we got to play it out. And that's why I don't want to knock it down too fast, because I think depending on the type of operation, it could
Depends
work.
on the attractor.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in 2011, 2012, I was putting traps in fields thinking, okay, I'm going to know when to spray.
Yeah.
Well, by the time they showed up in the traps, the field was full of spotted berry.
Yeah.
So they go to the fruit before they go to the trap. That's my experience.
Yeah, traps are good for forecasting or for identifying hot spots. Like if you put them on the outside of your field, really big part that I think we can make a lot of progress on is learning the individual fields and where the habitat is around that field that is bringing the threat in. If you can manage that, either like Julie was saying, spraying the border areas, although you got to be really careful there what you're spraying them with, or watching that area for the buildup. you'll be able to, and also just spraying possibly that part of the field that's adjacent to their habitat. It's gonna reduce their risk coming into the field.
What about research for the pouch lures? Like public research, there hasn't been much and those seem to be pretty promising. Do you know if that's coming along with more
Oh.
research?
What kind of lure?
Like the pouch lures that are, as opposed to doing the apple cider lures, so
Oh,
what you
yeah.
have, like what you have there from,
I was gonna open one up, but they almost make me nauseous the way they smell, like they're very sweet smell. But yes, the dry lures, sweet.
yeah.
They're looking good, they're really promising.
I just
But
haven't
you know,
seen-
the difficulty with the whole trapping system is, I think it works good for me, who does a lot of, you know, regional trapping. But for growers to use traps effectively, they need to have some real information, knowledge, and prioritize it. You can't just put traps out there and check them once in a while, or try to time your sprays by them. But they will tell you when the population is building up. If you're consistent and objective, you'll be able to tell what your threat level is this year compared to last year, and start building up some information that you can make use of to reduce the amount of toxins you're putting into the field.
And the other thing too is what generation you're working with, because if you're working with the overwintering population that's still showing up in the trap versus a new population that is showing up in the trap, if you can identify the females correctly and the males too, but mostly the females correctly, you can see what generation you're working with, which gives you an indication of how things are rolling in the season.
Pouch lures, $6.50 a pop too, and they're only good for about 2 weeks.
So economically, but you know, the trap evolution's getting better. We used to have those old things. This is basically what we're using now. We'll probably be going to something like this soon, but I don't want to buy 500 of something I'm not sure is going to be the right thing either, so. But there's evolution and work going on trapping systems, on lures. It's ongoing. We're just kind of getting caught in a pesticide treadmill here real quick. I mean, we've gone right into it, and it's good that we've got it, but I think we need to really keep I don't think anybody's really happy about this, including all the suppliers and producers, because we're getting secondary problems. We're going to get resistance, we're going to get kickback on too many residues, and you guys don't want to spend all this money or have your field be a toxic environment all the time either. So, I mean, it's to everybody's advantage that we keep moving this thing forward. That sounds a little like a wrap-up, but I'm not sure what time is it? Does anybody else have any other insights into SWD? I mean, figuring this bug only showed up 5 years ago, I think we've done a fantastic job, and our researchers have too, about managing this crisis. But I think it has gotten past the point of being a crisis, and we got to figure out how we can modify the situation to improve our overall crop environment. Help me thank these guys. Pesticide credits.